Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and today I am sure you are sick of me talking about this thing, and today I'm actually going to start getting some work done. Okay, so before we get stuck into the build, I just want to cover a few little points from last episode. Some of you were talking about different gearbox options, saying why I didn't use this or that. Some of your options were enormous. 350Z gearboxes, etc., are basically as big as the T56 out of the GM cars. Some of you suggested I use gearboxes from something like an RX-8 or something like that. That's the same gearbox. This is basically, this Subaru BRZ gearbox is essentially the same gearbox as used in a heap of other cars, IS200s, S15 200Xs, RX-8, there's heaps. It's essentially the same gearbox manufacturer, S2000s, it's all the same thing. It's just slightly different packaging, maybe different bell housings, etc. But yeah, so this gearbox I think should do the job quite nicely, and it's also, it's not really a power-related issue with it braking, it's more of a torque issue, and most of the cars that are braking it have got really high torque down low, particularly some of these turbo cars where when the turbo kicks in, it really brings on a lot of torque low in the range, whereas this is not really a heavily torquey engine. It's quite a peaky engine, making all of its power right at the top of the rev range. So I think this should handle it quite nicely. Okay, and another sort of almost win I had, I went down to Benny's Custom Works yesterday and was chatting to Benny, and he had an old BRZ flywheel lying around. And as you can see, it's sitting on the car. It doesn't really quite fit. These bolts are only just tightened in. The bolt pattern is almost exactly the same as the BRZ. At first I thought it was, but the Ferrari is actually about a millimetre or two tighter bolt pattern than the BRZ. So what I'll probably be able to do is get a standard flywheel, just get it machined and get these bolt holes, probably get them just slotted slightly, and I need to get a new central spigot made up that I can press into the Ferrari crank that will line up the factory clutch. So then I can just use basically a almost standard flywheel and a standard or a Subaru clutch, Subaru starter motor. The whole lot will be Subaru except for the Ferrari engine, which is exactly what I wanted. So that's a big win there. I've started doing some measuring on the adapter plate that I have to make up. I'm just struggling at the moment because I don't have any verniers that are big enough. I really need to get some 450mm long verniers so that I can actually do all the measurements. And the way I'm going to do it, I'll go into this in more detail later, but basically is I will be triangulating the measurements of every single bolt. So I start with each bolt to the center, and then each bolt to each other bolt, and do every single bolt that way, so that when you can put this all into SolidWorks, you can get all the measurements exact, and that way everything is triangulated, so you get an exact measurement of everything, and you can get the exact center, etc. On the Subaru, it's actually, even though the bolt holes are reasonably all over the place, one thing that in some of the research we found is that the dowels on the Subaru gearbox are actually perfectly evenly spaced from the center input shaft, and they're perfectly in line with the input shaft. So that's a great way of being able to tie down the exact center of the gearbox, particularly because the input shaft has a little bit of play in it. But that's an easy way to calculate that. And to be honest, the dowels are the main thing that have to be perfect. The bolt holes have a little bit of wiggle room. It's the dowels that really get everything going. All right, enough of me yabbering on. Let's start looking at what I'm going to be doing today. So a lot of you have noticed that the Ferrari engine is very tall, and I don't want the plenum sitting right up out of the bonnet looking crazy. My plan is to try and get it. There will be a bonnet bulge in this car. It's a must. It's going to have to happen. But I want to try and keep it neat and suiting the look of the car. I don't want some big, ugly fiberglass monstrosity on there. I want it hopefully to be all in steel and looking good. I do want to keep the plenums on the Ferrari engine, and I've got a plan for that. But one of those things is to actually get the engine sitting as deep into the engine bay as I can. It's nice and tight in here, but one of the biggest hurdles of getting the Ferrari engine down is this cross member in the front is really, really deep. It's made out of 2.5mm pressed sheet metal, and this is sort of the main center front structure of the car. Now, I'm going to cut it out, or cut out some of it. I'm going to leave the bottom of it, and I'm going to cut down and then reinforce it all so that I can get this Ferrari engine in down as deep and low in the center of the car as I possibly can. And that is my job for today. So time to get this thing off of the rotisserie so I can start getting in and start cutting some stuff out. Okay, so you can see that I have now got the rotisserie out of the way, and you might have noticed that I've left the frame on. And the main reason for this is going to form the bracing. It's already bolted up either side of the cross member, which is where I'm going to cut. So this will help keep it all in line. I also spent a fair bit of time getting this level on the hoist. So I was adjusting the legs, adjustable feet on the hoist to get everything perfectly level and square so that I can now fit the Ferrari engine in and level that up so that everything is as level as I can get on this old car that doesn't seem to have much that's actually level and even. But we'll be working on fixing that up anyway. Others of you were concerned about the damage to the car, and I'm actually going to be taking this to Tim's, and Tim has a factory Alfa Romeo frame, a jig that you can actually bolt this on. It bolts onto the factory suspension points so you can see if the car is completely square or not, and I will be doing that to this car. So I will be getting this car perfectly square and even before it all goes back together, so you don't need to worry about that damage in the back. It's all repairable, and it's actually, I don't know how much superstructural damage is done because it seems to be all on the other side of the suspension mounting points. It's basically the cosmetic end of the car rather than actually in the middle. It seems pretty straight. So, all right, let's start marking out what I need to do down here and start cutting. Okay, so I took off the bracing mainly because the Ferrari engine actually is offset to one side, the base of it. There's an oil line that runs down what will be the driver's side of the car, and I'm going to have to trim down this a fair bit more on this side than over here. So I'm going to do some cutting, and the bottom half of this brace will stay in place for the time being, and I've marked where the big brace will go back in again. So once I'm done, I can bolt it all back in and make sure it's all square and straight before I weld it all up. So let's start cutting, and then we need to start seeing if we can fit an engine in this engine bay. Okay, well, I've cut that out now, and I don't think it's enough. I think I'm going to need a bit more on this side, just down here. It just, on the Ferrari engine, it sits much further over this way. I think the only way to test it properly though is to strip up a few more bits off of the engine and start trial fitting it in the engine bay and just see what we're working with. All right, this is the scary part. I've obviously done some measuring up till now, and I have some idea that this should come pretty close and fit the engine bay, but I haven't tried it yet. This is the first real go of seeing how the Ferrari engine fits into this little 105, and yeah, to say I'm nervous is an understatement, but let's give it a go. All right, first look at the engine in the engine bay. Now, it's probably a smidgen lower than what it's going to sit, and we already have some clearance issues. As you can see, this is all rusted out anyway. So I'm gonna have to just space that out slightly. I'll just reinforce this rail. You can see it's busted there anyway, so I've gotta fix this anyway, and I can clearance that there. Same on the other side. It's tight, but I think we can work with it. As for the back, we could probably go back a little bit once I actually have the gearbox set up. I can actually cut that tunnel out. The tunnel is obviously going to need to be a bit bigger than what it currently is. So I will cut the tunnel out, and I'll have a little bit more space there for the flywheel bolts. But there's plenty of room. I mean, it's not sitting super close at the front. I could actually still fit a factory radiator in there, which is good to see. Yeah, there's plenty of room. The only issue being the height. The highest I want the bonnet bulge is obviously the edge of the lip of this cowl panel here. And as you can see, the Ferrari plenums sit quite high. The thing that I'm going to be able to do though is to make these fit. I have alluded to it a little bit in the past. These here are long runners going into the top of the engine, and they do assist with sort of low and mid-range torque. I am going to cut them down and try and weld this manifold on lower than where it currently sits. So I reckon I've done some measuring, and I reckon I can drop it by about 60 mil. I can drop this manifold down and also rotate it around 360 degrees so that the throttle bodies face forward, and I can tilt them straight down and sort of swing them out to the sides. So we have, you know, throttle bodies coming out here and potentially going into somewhere in this sort of space around here, putting air filters on either side. That is the rough plan at this stage, but it is looking good. All right, so with the engine out, I did a bit of a mark in here. Getting the exhaust manifold through here is going to be really difficult on this side. As such, I'm going to cut this up quite high and angle it down, and we'll reinforce that, and I'll put the engine mount on this side up really high and make up as much room on this side as I can. That side, there's heaps. So now I'm just going to do some more cutting, and I'll probably weld in a captive nut up here so I can make up an engine mount a bit later, and we'll keep moving forward. So you can see here, I fit in the captive bolt. I'm going to get under while it's still open and weld it in, just so that I have a new spot for the engine mount because I cut the old one off. Get that all in there, get it all cleaned up, and then I'm going to clean up the outside and get ready to reinforce and remake my crossmember section. All right, so you can see I've made up these two support rails. I've spent some time tapering the ends of them so that they fit in nicely, and they should be a nice support for the bottom frame. So these are 2mm box section, and then I'm going to go over the top again with 3mm plate. So this should be nice and chunky and solid, and more than adequately reinforce this again to where it was. So I'm going to go through now, I'm going to bolt back on my structure, my frame, and weld these in. All right, so here you can see that I have stitch welded the whole, both rails in there to add that structural support in there now. Now it's time to go through and start capping it all in with 3mm steel plate. So there's going to be extra reinforcing on top of all of that. And to do that, I'm going to use these cardboard templates and draw up my, my templates as I need them and cut them out of the plate, weld them in. So I am pretty confident that this is easily as strong as what was there. It's double the thickness. The bottom bracing is still there. It's just the top that was changed, and I've reinforced all of it. But just to make triply sure, is I'm going to add another little triangular, couple little triangular gussets in the corners here, just to tie it all in, just to get that little bit extra triangulation and strength. But yeah, I think that is rock solid and should do the job nicely. All right, that I am confident is super strong. Actually, I just noticed I'm going to just chuck another bit of weld in there just to tie that all in, but that is at least as strong as what was there, if not more. And now I'll just sit the engine back in again, just so I can see it in there. That looks awesome. I am super stoked. It's in there. I think there's enough room. I'm gonna have to do some playing around for exhaust manifolds and stuff, but there's a bit of playing around, but overall it's tight, but it's gonna work. And yeah, I'm happy with that cross member. I think it's well and truly strong enough. So, all right, that is all the time I have today. So that means it's time for Fun Facts with Mrs. Jeff.
Hey guys, in September 1939, after many years of unrest in Europe, World War II broke out and Alfa Romeo was not immune. They switched their production from cars to aircraft engines. Most notably was an inverted V12 engine which was produced under license from Daimler-Benz and was used in the fighter planes the Macchi Fogori, which is Italian for Thunderbolt. On the 14th of February 1943, English Lancasters bombed the factory, and then again in October of 1944. The second bombing destroyed about 60% of the site, effectively closing down the factory. After the war, the company struggled to return to profitability. The luxury vehicles were proving hard to sell, and this was the beginning of Alfa Romeo switching to smaller, more mass-produced vehicles.
That was a full day, but I'm quite happy. We have a Ferrari engine in an Alfa. It's not doing anything, it's just sitting there, but it's there.
Just very happy with this hot Italians. I like that joke, it was very funny. I didn't make that joke, a viewer did, but I think it was a good one. It's hot Italians.
Yeah. So there's still more work, plenty more work to keep me busy on this thing for a while, which is good.
Yeah, and please stay out of the kitchen, because I did thank you to a viewer for alerting me to what Jeff was doing with my pots and pans while I was busy at work.
She saw the 9/11 video that I just did.
And then you go, and then you're like, oh, it's all organic because there's oil.
Anyway, as always, like, subscribe, hit that Patreon link, and if you join us on Patreon, you get to watch these videos a day before everybody else. Next video is going to be back on the 911 engine. I'm going to try and do the sort of the early week 911 and the end of the week do the Alpha. That's my current plan, as long as I've got enough to do on both.
Cool.
All right.
And we'll see you next week.
All right, guys.
Bye.
See you next time.